Medicine with the Metals. Tonight we're honored. We have a really special guest, author, speaker, and friend of the plant medicine community, Mr. Dennis McKenna.
Yeah, and as a special treat tonight on this podcast, as members of our community are so excited about having you on, we will bring them on to answer a few questions. But welcome.
Welcome,
We're so
Dennis.
honored to have you.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you here today.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. So let's just dive right into it. The first thing that I would like to talk with you about is one of your first, or probably your first experience with psychedelics. And I know that it was with your brother, Terrence, and you were young teenager in your home in Colorado, maybe?
Well, I don't know where you get that information because it's all wrong.
Oh, it's all wrong. Okay.
My first experience with, my first real psychedelic experience was with LSD. A few years before that, I had what you might call a disappointing encounter with morning glory seeds, which didn't do much, I mean, I got thoroughly sick. I didn't get much of an effect, but if that dates me, that lets you know this was like mid-60s,
Right.
And there was a lot of buzz at the time. There was a lot of interest in these morning glory seeds, which of course contain lysergic acid, amides. And it was thought that you could just go to the garden store and get these morning glory seeds and get high. And I was 16 or 15 at the time, and I was ready to try anything. What they didn't tell you is that they had put some substance on these morning glory seeds to dissuade people from doing exactly that. So it wasn't the seeds that made me sick. It was whatever junk they put on the seeds. Anyway, that's another story. I didn't have my first psychedelic experience until my first real psychedelic experience until 2017. And it was in Berkeley. I had gone out there with a friend of mine from Colorado to spend part of the summer. My brother was living in Berkeley. And, we came out for the summer of love, right? 1967 was the summer of love. 50 or more years ago, which is kind of amazing to think. And so we were staying with Terrence in Berkeley, and we my friend and I, my friend who traveled out with me, of course, we wanted to take a psychedelic, and there was, lots of places, potentially sources. What was available was pretty much LSD. There wasn't anything else, particularly at that time. No mushrooms, none of that. So we made a connection with this wild-eyed looking guy on the streets on Telegraph Avenue, and he sold us these two little tablets, which were aspirin tablets, basically, with a tiny purple dot in the center, and this was LSD, and he vouched for it. Of course he vouched for it. He's not going to say, I'm really selling you shit here, man. No, as it turned out, it was pretty good.
There you go.
What's that?
There you go. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, my friend and I went up to Tilden Park, the park behind Berkeley, and on a sunny afternoon, and we had a wonderful time. And that was my initiation into a real psychedelic. I had taken cannabis, of course, but the year before that, I'd become acquainted with cannabis. So that was our experience, and it wasn't really with Terrence. He was back at his place on Telegraph Avenue, holding down the fort, doing what he did at that time, which was mostly hold salons or informally. But anyway, Bob and I were out in the woods tripping our balls off and really getting into it, So it was a wonderful initiation into psychedelics.
Beautiful.
And so your parents, I've always been curious about where was their stance on all of this, and what did they think of this, and what throughout their life?
Oh, my poor parents. They didn't get any of it. I think that there were, at some points, they probably became convinced that Terrence and I were the spawn of Satan. I mean, we were difficult children. Let's put it that way. We were very rebellious. We were curious. We were interested in all sorts of things that we shouldn't have been, including psychedelics, probably. We were raised Catholic. My parents were not particularly strict Catholics, but they were Catholic. So we had that whole, background in our childhood of Catholicism, and Terrence and I were both influenced by that quite a bit. And our teenage years was about rejecting all that, getting past all that, in some way recuperating or recovering from that. Although they say about Catholics, you never actually recover, but you can paper it over.
Right.
But our parents did not get this at all, especially my dad. I mean, he was totally against all of this stuff, and he had a lot of misconceptions, like most parents back in the day, and they were just convinced that we were going to become drug addicts and, that we were pretty much headed to the road to perdition, and it took a long time for us to convince them otherwise. I mean, we had to, leave home and actually start to pursue careers that involved psychedelics. And 10, 20, 30 years later, they finally sort of came around to the idea that, well, maybe maybe there is something to these things. Maybe they're not so bad. The boys seem to be okay. I mean, they're weird, but they've always been weird.
Aren't we all, though? Aren't we all in our own ways?
Yeah. I mean, we were nerds, and we didn't really fit into our social milieu in this tiny Colorado town, And Terrence was 4 years older than me, so he left to do his junior and senior year out in California. He finally convinced my parents to let him go to California and spend the last years of his high school years with my brother, with my mother's sister and her husband, who were school teachers in Menlo Park, California. Okay. So that was right where the action is. That's where he wanted to be, and he convinced my parents. Basically, he harassed them mercilessly, about getting out of this podunk, shithole that was Paonia, Colorado, And finally they said, okay, all right, you can go. And so he went out there, and that was about, he was a junior, so that would have been 1963, I think, when he went out there. He graduated in 65, and it was there's a whole other long story behind that. But I was always the good brother. I felt badly for the terrible way my brother treated my parents. I felt a lot of guilt about it, so I tried to make up for it a little bit by being a little bit kinder. Not that I was, I was interested in all the crazy stuff that Terrence was. And as you can imagine, being 4 years older than me and being in California while I was stuck back in Paonia, Colorado, he was a long distance bad influence on me.
There you
and a
go.
short distance bad influence on me too. When he'd come back to Paonia during the summers and at Christmas vacation and that sort of thing, and sometimes bring interesting substances with him, And then in 1967, my friend and I went to Berkeley, for the Summer of Love, and whatever possessed Dad to let us go, I have no idea. I mean, he had to know
Yes.
that there was some stuff gonna go down, but he did. He let us go, and we spent about 3 weeks, in the Bay Area, kind of bouncing between San Francisco and Berkeley, and and getting into it. We were into the whole countercultural thing at that time. So that's how I got started on it. We can blame Terrence. It's basically, I'll either credit him or blame him, depending on how you want to look at it. But basically, I credit him because, it's pretty clear that had it not been for psychedelics, we would have lived, our lives would have been much less interesting than they turned out to be. I mean,
And so
in some ways, I think we owe. What's that?
And so about that time, weren't you? When were you in Colombia around there? I don't know.
Well, we went to Colombia. Yeah, we went to Colombia in 1971.
71.
And the reason that we did that was that I mentioned before that in Berkeley and in the counterculture generally, there wasn't much around. I mean, LSD was pretty much what there was. But my brother was able to work the matrix pretty well, and he came up with DMT. And we were absolutely fascinated by DMT. We thought LSD is interesting. DMT is the ultimate, and we just thought it was the ultimate doorway into this, other realities. And that's really how we thought of it, was our sort of guiding concept for this was not spiritual tradition or indigenous practices or any. I mean, we knew about these things, some of it, knew a little bit about it, but what the conceptual framework for what got us interested was really, I guess you'd have to credit science fiction. I mean, we were, both of us, deeply steeped in science fiction. And so when psychedelics came along and began to be talked about in the media and so on, we thought, wow, this is about going to other dimensions. These will transport you to other dimensions. Whatever that meant, but that was our conceptual framework. And so DMT seemed like the perfect doorway into these alien dimensions. But what was frustrating about DMT was it's very short. You smoke it, and by the time you're in the place, fully loaded, you're already coming down. It's already evaporating because it passes through your body so quickly.
Correct.
So we were interested in finding a way to make it prolong the experience. We thought very naively that if you could spend more time in that space, you could have a better chance to look around and see what was going on and get a handle on it, So at the time, this was 1970, 71. We went to Colombia in 71, but we were preoccupied with this whole thing around DMT from about 1968 on. And the pharmacology of ayahuasca was not really understood at that time. We now know that ayahuasca is an orally active form of DMT, that the monoamine oxidase inhibitors in the vine prevent its degradation in the gut when you drink the brew, protect it, allow it to be absorbed into the bloodstream intact. And then instead of a 20-30 minute experience, you get, 4 to 6 hours, so there's plenty of time to see what is going on. And that was attractive to us. But we knew about ayahuasca, but no one really knew that ayahuasca was a combination of Banisteriopsis and a DMT containing admixture. What came up on our radar was a paper in the Harvard Botanical Museum leaflets by the famous Richard Evans Schultes. And the title of the paper was Varrola as an orally active hallucinogen. And that was the title of his paper. Varrola, as you probably know, is one of the genera of trees that the sap is made into snuffs by different tribes throughout the Amazon basin. Like the Yanomami is particularly well known for their Varrola snuffs, called Yacawana and many other names. So the sap of Varrola species is very high in DMT and 5-methoxy-DMT, but like tryptamines, it's not orally active. And so that's why they make snuffs out of it, right? They go around that. But turns out, actually, it is orally active. And that was the basis of this paper that came out. It turns out that the Witoto Indians and related tribes prepared an oral preparation from Varrola. They basically just concentrated the sap, they extracted the sap, and they took this material in little pills, little pastillas, and it was said to be very strong, act very quickly, and let you get in touch with the little people, which we were also obsessed with, connecting with the little people, and so we thought, aha, this is it. This drug, which nobody'd ever heard of, very few people have ever heard of it, even today, except that I've talked about it a lot. But it was called ukuhe. Roughly, that's how the Witoto said it. They called it ukuhe, and we thought, okay, ukuhe is it. Ukuhe is the secret that we've been seeking. So we dropped everything. I quit school. Terrence wasn't in school at the time, but I suspended my studies at the University of Colorado, and we took off for South America in search of this legendary Witoto hallucinogen. And we went to this place called La Chorrera in the southern Colombian Amazon, because that was their ancestral home. And that's where Schultes had written about. That's where he'd made his collections and so on. So we went to La Chorrera in search of ukuhe. And we thought about it as, the secret. And, the secret we were seeking. Well, when we got to La Chorrera, which was a whole adventure that we've both written about, most notably in my brother Terrence's book, True Hallucinations, about that journey. But when we got to La Chorrera, we had been sort of forewarned by an anthropologist that we'd encountered on the way in at the village downriver from there. And when we informed him why we had come and what we were looking for, he was none too happy about it. It was, you can't send a text and say, I'll be on your doorstep, tomorrow morning. You just have to show up. When these people who were far freakier than the Witoto, we looked like we'd stepped right out of Haight-Ashbury, which essentially we had. We had the bells, we had huge beards, we were wearing
long hair,
white linen clothes. I mean, we were a colorful bunch,
Yeah, I bet.
5 of us. So the anthropologist had said, you can't just walk into these villages and start talking about this. He was appalled that we even knew about it. And we said, well, we ran across this paper by Schultes, and we thought this would be pretty neat. This is what we're here for. And so he said, well, you can't, they'll just kill you. They said, this is the most secret of their shamanic secrets, right? And so we said, yeah, whatever, doc, we'll be careful. We won't do stupid, we'll be a little discreet. We're not going to just blunder in there and say, take us to the ukuhe. We're not quite that culturally insensitive. So with that in mind, we continued on to La Chorrera. And when we got to La Chorrera, we thought, well, we'll just, hang out here for a while. It was a mission school. It was a Capuchin mission school. And there were all kinds of huts scattered around in the jungle where the students' parents would stay when they would bring them in from the jungle, for the semester. And these were empty now. This was the off season. So we had our choice of places to hang out. And the padre at the mission, kindly offered us a place that was kind of separated from the main part of the village, off in the jungle a ways. I'm sure there was a reason why he put us there, to keep us safely away from decent people. But so we were grateful for that. And then it turns out, as it turned out, they had cleared about 400 or 200 to 400 acres of jungle around this mission village, and they had brought in these Cebu cattle, these white humpbacked Cebu cattle. Well, the dung of those cattle happens to be the preferred substrate for psilocybin cubensis, which is the pan-global psilocybin mushroom.
Right.
And it was the rainy season. And out of every cow pie was growing huge clusters of these beautiful mushrooms, and we knew what they were. We had done our homework, but we knew what they were, but we had very little experience, almost no experience with them. We on the way in, we had encountered some in a field at one of the villages that we stopped in overnight, but it was dry at that time. There were only a couple specimens, so we couldn't really get a full dose, and so we took those, and kind of interesting. But then at La Chorrera, these mushrooms were everywhere and in abundance, so we thought, well, our approach to them was sort of much more casual than it should have been. We had no idea, we thought of these as kind of fun recreational drugs, and we thought, well, we can hang out here and have fun with these mushrooms while we're working on getting the real secret, right? This ukuhe, make discrete inquiries and so on. So we started eating the mushrooms, and we started eating them regularly, like daily, and not small doses. I mean, in part, we incorporated them into their diet, our diet, because there wasn't that much to eat around the place. We had some rice and beans that we brought with us. You could sometimes buy fruit from the little store in the mission, but there wasn't a lot to eat, and we probably hadn't brought in enough really to eat. So we started incorporating these into our diet. They make quite a delicious soup, as you can imagine, even if it is blue, and so we started taking these things at first pretty low doses, and it was recreational, but then as we got into it, the mushrooms kind of set the agenda. They made it clear to us that they were the real secret. That
Right.
they kind of reoriented our priorities because we hadn't been able to connect with this ukuhe, and these delivered on every level. They were profound psychedelics, they were non-toxic, they were kick-ass. You could have very, very deep psychedelic experiences with them. So that was sort of this accidental discovery of these mushrooms became sort of the myth of our adventures at La Chorrera. The mushrooms started, effectively transmitting a lot of messages to us about things we could do, so kind of psychophysical operations on our own body. And we don't need to get into that. People could read about
Right.
it. We'll never get out of here if we go into depth. But
Absolutely.
that was, that
the
was my,
mushrooms.
yeah.
It seems the mushrooms reveal the truth.
The mushrooms do reveal the truth. And can we talk about
Indeed,
that a
I
little
think
bit?
they do.
Truth through mushrooms. What can we bring Brooke in? Because she has a question about microdosing. Let's let her ask her question, and then let's talk
we'd love
about
to
that.
talk about the mushrooms more.
Hey, Brooke.
Hi. Hopefully
Sure.
my connection's okay. It's been going in and out. Just let me know
Ask
if
your
it's
question, Brooke.
Yeah, okay, so I have a question about the microdosing and in relation to maybe cannabis, as it's like sought after for anything from anxiety to quite the opposite, stimulant. And I personally would like to replace some of the pharmaceutical medications that I'm on now for microdosing. So is there potential that maybe psilocybin or psilocybin containing mushrooms might have more of an effect or target a specific, I would say, like, could there be one for to help with anxiety, and then one that may be better for like energy or to give you a stimulant kind of effect, but so to speak, more or less.
Thanks, Brooke.
Right. Well, you can microdose. Microdosing is popular these days. A lot of people do that, and I'm kind of a skeptic in some ways. But my feeling is that if you feel there's a benefit from it, then go for it. There's the mushrooms are non-toxic, so there's no issue. You can take them daily, and if you take small amounts, less than a gram, or if you take, I think the usual microdose is around. It varies, but between maybe 0.2 of a gram to 0.4 of a gram. That's kind of the upper level. And I think it's fine if you feel there's a benefit to it, then there's no reason not to do it. What I would say is, don't forget that just around the corner there's a world of wonder waiting to be discovered.
Way better. Way better.
So don't forget that the microdose is just a shadow of what you might discover if you take a macrodose.
Absolutely.
So people that microdose, I recommend. Actually, I think microdosing is great to follow up to really to sort of reaffirm what you learn in the macrodose sessions. Then you can follow up with microdosing, and it will help you integrate that. And if it relieves anxiety, or if it relieves depression, or if you just generally feel better, certainly it's better than any number of pharmaceuticals that you might take. So go for it. I would say one thing so I think mushrooms are very safe to microdose with. I think that ayahuasca is probably very safe to microdose with, and some people do. They'll take 10 or 20 milliliters a day, and that's keeps them tuned up, and I think that's perfectly fine. I have some reservations about microdosing with LSD because some people do that, and usually it's maybe 50 to 100 micrograms, probably no more than 100 micrograms to microdose with LSD. There is some concern about the way that that LSD may interact with a particular serotonin receptor, the 5-HT2B receptors, I believe it is, or 1B receptors. These can cause, it can over prolonged use, it may cause damage to the valvular tissue in the heart. It has the potential to do this. There are substances that were taken off the market back at the end of the 90s, fen-phen and fenfluramine, because they did have this adverse effect on the heart. There's no actual evidence that LSD has caused this kind of damage, but potentially it could. We know it hits those receptors that are involved. And in part, it's because of LSD binds to the receptor in a unique way that these other things don't. The reason it's so potent, in part, is because it binds into the receptor, and then a piece of the receptor folds over it, and it keeps it in there. And it's very, it does not easily dissociate. So you keep getting, it keeps pushing the button, of the receptors. Right. So there could be some long-term adverse effect. There's no evidence for it, but there's the potential of it, and since something like something like mushrooms are easily available and they don't have this issue, I caution people about microdosing with LSD, not necessarily to not do it, but at least to read up on the potential adverse effects of it. I'm talking long term.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you.
The answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Let's continue with that. Like I truly believe that microdosing is beneficial, and it gets you to that macrodosing stage. So going into that.
So I would like to touch on quickly. I've seen other interviews with you about the different medicines, and I'd like to talk on the different medicines, and in particular, ayahuasca and psilocybin, which you just touched on. And I know people feel that the psilocybin's like the easy one, like you said, when you went and did it, and they think it's fun, right? Mm-hmm. They don't understand
how powerful. Be fooled.
They don't know how powerful it is.
I'm here to tell you, psilocybin can be very challenging.
Yes.
But yes.
Can you touch a little on the different I'm
the different medicines like ayahuasca, iboga. I mean, all these medicines have a different use for, I feel, mental health. Mm-hmm. I think iboga is a great medicine for addiction. I think ayahuasca gets to that heart. Mm-hmm. But I think that 5-MeO that gives you your God, let's get rid of that ego. But what's your opinion on these?
Yeah.
Well, I think all these psychedelics have their place, I mean, iboga is a kind of a horse of a different color. It's not really a psychedelic in the classical sense. It can certainly be very useful for addiction. I mean, I think there's plenty of evidence for that, and other things. It is challenging. I mean, it's serious medicine. Just in terms of the duration. A full dose can be 36 to 48 hours, the way
Mark
they do it in
Gabon.
That's a long time.
I just got back from Iboga Sol down with Mark Howard down in Iboga Sol, Mexico, on Iboga. I can tell you it's a very, very powerful medicine.
Yeah, it is. It can be, and I think for some people it's probably just the ticket, especially if you're, for addiction for sure, particularly opioid addiction. But then for people with long-term, issues with trauma and that sort of thing, it can be very helpful. And all of these things basically can, ayahuasca, psilocybin, they can address the same kinds of issues, which is not surprising because they're working on the same set of receptors, more or less. Iboga being an exception to that. Iboga is working on a variety of receptors that these other things don't interact with. But you're going to get the same benefits out of ayahuasca, roughly, that you're going to get from mushrooms, because again, ayahuasca is just a orally active form of DMT. And in a certain sense, so are mushrooms. I mean, psilocin is the active form of psilocybin. Psilocybin is converted to psilocin within the body, and psilocin is very, very close to DMT, molecularly speaking. It does not require an MAO to be orally active, which may be a good thing. It's the activity is built into the molecule, and at high doses, psilocin and DMT that's pretty much the same dimension. It's the same place. Psilocybin can be less challenging in some ways, but people should, it's hard to generalize. You can't say psilocybin is easy, ayahuasca is difficult. They can both be challenging.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Or they can both be easy, and a lot of it has to do with the eternal variables of set and setting. Those are the factors that determine the outcome. That's why you need to pay attention to set and setting, as well as what the medicine is, and of course what the dose is. But the setting needs to be appropriate, to foster these kinds of experiences. You want to be very thoughtful about the setting. Number one, you want to do it in a place that is safe, that you're not, so that you're able to surrender and just open yourself up to it. So you have to trust the therapist or the curandero or the shaman. You have to feel good about the people that are participating with you. You need to feel like this is a safe place, where these transformative processes can go on. So once that's done, then you're safe to go. Then the more complicated part is the set, and the set is what you're bringing to it. The set is you. The set is your expectations, what you want to get out of it, your intention. Those are kind of the variables that are part of the set. But the set is really everything you bring to it, your whole life, your entire mindset, all your previous experiences. The set is you, and the set is by far the most complicated part of this relationship. The medicine is what it is. It will do what it will do, but the way an individual responds to it, how they prepare for it, what they expect to get out of it, how they integrate what happens afterwards, that's where the work goes on, and these things should not be approached in from a place of fear, but they should be approached from a place of respect. You've got to respect the medicine and yourself and whoever is holding the space, as they say, and if you feel good about those things, then you're free to open up and just have a wonderful transcendent experience. And that's what we're shooting for, right?
So it seems like in a lot of these experiences in all the medicines, a common theme is sacred geometry. I'd like to touch on sacred geometry for just a minute. And we've got Monica. She's got a question about sacred geometry too. And I'd like to let her ask what she's got here.
Hi, Dennis.
Okay. Hi.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. I always see sacred geometry when I have my journeys. I always macrodose the psilocybin mushrooms, and I've done ayahuasca as well. And on both, there's this beautiful dance of sacred geometry. I always see it in nature. I'll see clear bits of it, but I can also see it in clouds and trees. And there's this beautiful rhythmic dance that I always see. I guess I want to know, why is that? Not everybody sees it. I ask other people, and not everyone is seeing what I'm seeing. So I'm curious.
Well, not everyone sees what you see, but they see something that is unique to them. That's one thing about psychedelics. One beautiful thing about psychedelics is everybody's trip is unique. Nobody can take your medicine for you. You have to do it yourself. So that's a good thing. You can't delegate this experience, and every experience is unique to each person. So, the fact that you see sacred geometry and other people don't, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that they're not, they may be seeing other things. I think sacred geometry is built into it's built into the structure of reality, and it's also built into the structure of the way our brain perceives things, the architecture of the brain. The brain is an instrument that detects patterns, and sacred geometry are patterns. One thing that is a remarkable property of psychedelics is that they bring the background forward. We are programmed to suppress the background of our perceptions. We're, in ordinary waking consciousness, we got to be paying attention, for the, if you're driving on the freeway or if you're, out in the wild, you want your attention to be on that saber-toothed tiger that's about to attack you, and psychedelics demolish that attention. They open it up. They destroy, they disable, they don't destroy, but they temporarily disable what they call the default mode network, which is effectively our brain, the strategies our brain developed for attention and ordinary consciousness, which can be quite useful. But sometimes you want to, one of the useful things about psychedelics is that they can disable this default mode network temporarily, and they let you focus on the background, which we normally suppress. And when you do that, when you bring the background forward, you see that there are a lot of phenomena going on in the background that are interesting, maybe even important, but we're programmed to suppress those because they don't relate to our immediate survival or our immediate needs. But when you do that, when you're in this open state and you look into nature and you see sacred geometry effectively, which permeates nature, I think it permeates reality. It's just that now you're more open to it. In that open state, you see these patterns. They're always there, but we don't notice them always. And I think sacred geometry, however you want to define that, but I think it is built into the way the brain works, and it's actually built into the way that reality works as well. I mean, this is why you find in nature, some of these remarkable geometric relationships and so on, like the Fibonacci series. You probably heard of that. Or the way the leaves are structured or arranged on a plant. They're arranged according to strict mathematical ratios, the golden mean and all of those things. You probably know much more about sacred geometry than I do. I'm no expert on it, but but these things are in nature, and what psychedelics do is they give us the lenses, in effect, that you can look through to see these things that normally you don't see, and so I mean that kind of touches on some conversations I've had with other folks about how effectively you can think of psychedelics as scientific instruments in some ways, or maybe instruments for examining not only the inner landscape of yourself, but the outer landscape of nature. They give you a lens through which to look at nature and see it in a way that you never have before, and appreciate processes that are going on that, we just don't notice, because we're programmed to put our attention right in front of us and to filter out everything else. So that's
absolutely beautiful.
That's a beautiful way to describe it.
Beautiful way. Monica, thank you very much for that question. Very much.
Thanks.
Okay, Dennis, the way that you describe that, it reminds me, you remember when you're small and they have those things and you put the thing and you slap it and you look around. That's exactly what it is. It's like a lens that you can see what's already there. We just can't see it.
Right.
It's already there, and other people can see it. You don't have to necessarily be in an altered state to see it. For example, indigenous people, who have not been, conditioned by Western, culture or even literacy. I think that literacy is something that we all value. I mean, I think we like it that we can read, but in order to be able to read, you have to make certain sacrifices. When you read, you're very much putting your attention, you're creating a dualism between what you're looking at, the printed word, and you. There's a separation between that. You pretty much have to do that if you're going to read something or understand it. Indigenous people who have not been, educated, are not literate, I think their experience of nature is much different than that. I think it's much more holistic. If you go into the woods with an indigenous person, their perception of what is going on is going to be very different than yours. It's going to be much richer, for one thing, because you're going to miss a lot until maybe the person points out these things are going on. Notice this, notice what the ants are doing, notice what the insects are doing, notice, what's going on. And it's not that we can't perceive them, but we're programmed not to. When they call it to your attention, then you'd like, oh yeah, now I see. There's a whole lot going on in this natural environment that I ever imagined. And I think the same is true of children. I think that children at an early stage of life, they're just little open beings, they're open to all of this. They're sort of like, young, they're like these little elves on acid or something. They're completely open to what's happening. And that's what's delightful about children. They do not have these filters. They just take it all in, and so their experience is much richer than ours. As we grow up and become adults, we become conditioned to all these things, and we program ourselves to filter things out. A lot of what the brain does is filter things out. There's even a term for it called neural gating. And it's a necessary thing in order to function in ordinary consciousness. If everything just came through our sensory receptors, it would just be too confusing. We couldn't handle it. So the brain's developed these neural gating mechanisms so that, we program ourselves to focus on what we think is important, at least what's in front of us, and not pay so much attention to the stuff in the background. That may be important too, but we're programmed, not to pay as much attention. So I think that psychedelics are learning tools really for examining nature as much as they are for examining the interior landscape, if you will.
Absolutely.
Can I ask you this quickly? We wanted to touch on, and it's so funny you said it, the default mode network, because this is important. And I really want to clear this for a lot of our community. So the default mode network, this is everything that's been programmed in here up until, how would you describe?
I'm sorry, I was distracted. What
That's okay.
With the default mode network, it's so important in the process of psychedelics and how they break you down and how you integrate all this. Just, because it is so important to explain how that works and what that all consists of, because it's very important. I think it's the most important part of these psychedelic journeys to heal your mental health.
Yeah, I think so. So this has to do with what we were talking about before, the importance of set and setting. There are basically 3 phases of any serious, psychedelic experience. You can have psychedelics for recreational purposes, and that's fine. But if you're really into a serious exploration, so you've got, the pre-session, basically you need to have clarity about what your expectations are. You need to come to the experience with not necessarily an intention, but some people feel it's useful to have an intention. But you have to, it helps if you come to it from an informed place. You more or less know something about what you're going to experience, because these are life-changing experiences. So it's good to have some preparation, whatever seems appropriate. That may involve reading stuff like Arrowhead.org is very useful for, they have great trip reports for all these things. That's good. Or you might want to talk to other people that have had the experience. So there's the preparation stage. And in therapeutic settings, this is very formalized. You may have 2 or 3 preparation sessions before you actually get to take the medicine. Then you take the medicine. And then what do you do with that? You have to integrate that experience, or it evaporates. It will go away, but it's a question of what you take with it. What are the takeaway lessons, and what do you how do you come to terms with the experience, and then how do you go forward from that? And it may involve nothing more than just a change in attitude, or accepting that, wow, there's more to existence than I thought, and I got a glimpse of that. That's maybe all that the integration requires. In other people, integration may involve a lot of things. I'm going to quit smoking. I'll stop drinking. I'll do yoga every day. I'll change my diet. I'll do all those things. Those are up to the individual. That it depends on how you choose to integrate the experience, but it's important that there be some sort of integration, and it may just be, it may lead to whole, great changes in your lifestyle or so on, but it doesn't have to. It's important, though, that at least you reflect on it and think about the significance. Effectively, what have you learned? It's like going to a lecture or something that's from a brilliant teacher, and plants are brilliant teachers. They keep you thinking about what was covered long after the session is over. And sometimes about these retreats, I sometimes tell people, well, the work doesn't really begin until you're on the way home, you know.
So you're in that
after
airport.
that is when the work begins.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to talk about somebody that's done a lot of work. Her name's Angel. She's going to be our last guest. She's an amazing friend of ours, and she has some pretty good questions, and she runs a really cool retreat down in Costa Rica that we love.
Hey, Angel.
Hi,
Okay.
Dennis.
Hi.
Pleasure to meet you. I just want to say you are like a rock star in my community. So I'm super
sorry
excited
to hear that. I like the recognition, but I am not a rock star. I'm just like everybody else. I'm just trying to figure it out, you know. But thank you anyway. Yeah,
it's so beautiful. Like when I think about all the pioneers and the guys who really, you know, rock the boat, so to speak, and Leary and your brother, and there's many of you that are on this forefront, and you guys, to me, like, you didn't just talk it. You went out in the field, ate a bunch of mushrooms, did a bunch of LSD, and you came back with the science behind that, you know, like you went out in the field. And as I watch talks, I get a little concerned, because who the hell is going to do that now? Like, who does my daughter, who's 13, who is going to be her mentor? Like, do you have any big mentees that you work with, like, that passes on? Like, is there still guys going out and doing field testing?
Well, yes, yeah, you can go out and do field testing, you know. I mean, you can. All you have to do is you need a little common sense, you know. You need to be informed, you know. I mean, I guess that's what we lacked when we were younger. You know, we were out of control. We were not as cautious, maybe, as we should have been. You know, we were not as informed. We were more reckless, and you know, and we survived. But other people, there were casualties. You know. So I think it's just important, again, being informed about the substances and kind of what to expect, and doing them in appropriate settings, whatever that might be. Probably not on the freeway, you know, probably not those sorts of things. Maybe at a rock concert if you like that kind of thing. I mean, I would not, but you know, people do it all the time, and that's fine. I
guess what my big question is I mean, when you're a doctor, when you have this, the world is listening, right? You have this stage, and you have people that are really interested, because you have the people that are afraid to try psychedelics, but when they hear the science side of it, then they're in. If they hear the spiritual side of it, maybe not so much. They're really interested in that. So I guess my question is, I never see anybody really new on this forefront, like coming up under you, that they're actually able to influence the world, and people are actually listening. Like, is there anybody to watch out for in the near future that's got some really cool up and coming, you know, information for us? Or is there still those science guys out there doing this, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Oh yeah, there are definitely there are. You know, yeah, you can. There are people out there experimenting, and I mean, in some ways, a lot of the, you know, I mean, a lot of the territory, if you will, has been explored, you know, but not all of it, you know. And also, the thing about psychedelic experiences are, you know, it's really your own inner, you know, you're exploring the continent within, you know. Maybe you're not out in the jungle looking for drugs. I mean, though people can do that, but then it's created, you know, a mixed bag of you know, social consequences. I mean, the whole ayahuasca tourism thing has, you know, it's a double-edged sword, you know, and you guys are involved in that, so you understand this. The whole tourism thing, which I organized retreats myself, and I've seen tremendous transformations in people from these experiences. But then it takes place in a context where, you're depending on how and where and so on, maybe, we're not indigenous people, but we do tend to go to indigenous cultures to have these experiences. And I don't think you can fence them off. I would never advocate that, but I think we have to be aware that there are economic and other consequences to ayahuasca tourism. It's definitely a mixed bag. I mean, in the case of your daughter, if she is interested in experiencing psychedelics, I would not necessarily discourage it, but I would tell her, how old your daughter?
My daughter is 13, and we've brought her into some Brazilian tribal ceremonies. That's all I'll say.
She has done, or she is doing that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think that our whole family really has just evolved. I'm a nurse by trade, and now I live in the jungle and host villages.
So you're living in Brazil? You're living in Brazil right now?
We live in Costa Rica, up in the mountains, in the jungle. That's where our center is. And then we host tribes from Brazil to come and teach and to share their culture, wisdom, and medicine. And we do it in a little bit of a different way. So it's been very interesting. And my second question to you is kind of like more of a true psychedelic question, but have you ever had a shared psychedelic experience with somebody? Like, is it possible to have a shared psychedelic experience?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
It happens. It happens.
Tell me about this. I must know.
Interesting.
Well, just I've had experiences where I feel where in a group session people are seeing what essentially is the same thing, based on their descriptions of it and so on. This goes on, and I mean, it doesn't always happen, but it does happen. So yeah, I mean,
is it something that just happens, or is it something that you go in with an intention to, like, let's meet here?
It's never happened to me that way. I've never gone. When I go into the session, I'm usually interested in focusing on my thing, my trip, whatever it's going to be. I'm interested in, sort of interior focus. But when it does come up and people, you may not even know it when it's happening, but when the session is over and you go over it, talk about what people were seeing, then sometimes it comes up and you say, oh yeah, I was seeing that too. I was seeing this luminous being that appeared or whatever it was. These things go on, I don't know if there's a way to make them happen, but you just have to be open to it and hope that it'll happen if that's what you're shooting for.
Amazing.
But with respect to your daughter, to get back to that for a minute, I think the situation that you're in, working with these indigenous groups and holding retreats, that's probably the best situation she could be in to get to know psychedelics. She's working with her parents and people that you bring down, that you respect, and so on. So it's probably very helpful for her, and you're making a safe place for her to have these experiences, which is wonderful. 13 is a little young, but I don't think it's too young. In a lot of indigenous groups, that's about when they're introduced to ayahuasca. So I think that's fine.
Awesome. So one of my last questions, I'm going to try to make it my last, is through this process, like when you first started with psychedelics, like the science-y kind of exploration or curiosity. Do you find that through the years of psychedelics, evolutionary, like spiritual change, like what started as more like of a fun recreation curiosity, has that switched to ceremony becoming a more spiritual thing for you?
Yeah, I would have to say so. Yeah, when I was originally working with mushrooms mostly, I've always taken psychedelic or ayahuasca. I've taken in a more ceremonial context because that's just the way it's used, you know. But with mushrooms, a lot of my early experiences were either with one or two other people or by myself, you know, and that was fine. It didn't really seem to call for a social context like ayahuasca does. And yeah, it is a spiritual discipline in some ways, but I don't I mean, I enjoy the ritual context of traditional ceremonies, but I'm also acutely aware that I'm not indigenous. I can't really be part of this. I can respect it. I can participate, but I have to acknowledge that I'm seeing it through my unique personal and cultural lens, you know, which doesn't mean I can't participate or appreciate it. I mean, I do. Many people I know who get into ayahuasca, they get very serious about it, and they go down to South America and they do dietas and this sort of thing. And effectively, they train to become ayahuasqueros, you know, with the dieta and learning all the plants and the icaros and that sort of thing. And I think if that works for them, that's fine. I have not ever been drawn to that, you know. I sort of feel like, you know, I'm not an indigenous person, and there's no reason why I should do that. And maybe I'm missing something, but I haven't taken that approach. And I know other people who have used ayahuasca completely outside that context, you know, completely outside of any social context. People that do take it on their own, and you know, it's often said you shouldn't do this. You have to be in a group setting. Not necessarily, you know. I think that again, what it comes down to is there's an intense and very personal interaction between you, the set, and the medicine in the appropriate setting. So, and every person's experience is unique. You know, no one can have your psychedelic experience for you.
Yeah.
You got to do it yourself and take responsibility for it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Angel, so much
for that, Angel. We appreciate
so welcome.
that.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
And this has been, we have so many more questions, but we can't take so much more of your time. But, you know, beautiful conversation tonight. And we want to end it with something
just
special.
Appreciate this. We would love to continue this conversation. I mean, I wanted to talk to you about your experience in Hawaii. I mean, I have so many things I want to talk to you about, but we don't want to take up your whole night. We are grateful for your time. We found a quote from your brother, and we would like to end with this quote. And we might get emotional because this is very, you know, this is a deal for us. We are so excited to talk with you, and the work that you did has changed our lives and what we do. So we're just grateful to have you, and we hope to continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm always amused when people talk about it as the work that we did. They didn't think of it as work.
Right. But it was.
Maybe it was.
You know,
you've
It
got
yeah.
is. It is work, and one of the things that I want to talk about in the future again is it is work in the psychedelics and the work that you guys did with psychedelics, right? Even if it was just having fun,
Right.
and how that impacted. We talk with death doulas, how that impacted Terrence's his end of life experience.
Right.
I have so many questions for you. I would love to
And
get you
just
back
the
on
mental
and
health,
talk
the
with
whole
you.
mental health aspect of how
Mhm.
psychedelics really cure mental health.
Right, and
beautiful.
what the future looks like. I mean, there's a lot.
Well, we
There's
could
a lot.
always circle back on it. There's always a lot more to say, So
We
We would
definitely,
appreciate that.
definitely love it. We have a beautiful community we're all about integration, information,
Mhm. And
education.
Are
integration, because
you also in Costa Rica, you guys?
No, we're in
we're
Fort
in
Myers, Florida.
Mhm.
So
Where?
In Florida.
Fort Myers, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. Down in
Fort
Fort Myers.
Okay.
Southwest Florida.
That's where that big hurricane
Yeah,
hit.
we just got whacked.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're gonna
Okay.
end,
Well, good. It was a good conversation, and
great.
let me know when it's going to be posted so I can
Sure.
Yes. Well,
get
we'll
our
send you the
social media
information.
people to put it up there, and we can circle back on this one of these days and talk about all those things we didn't cover this time.
We
So,
Absolutely,
A few
absolutely.
of
So
them
the
anyway.
quote, the quote from your brother, and I may be mistaken, but I believe these were his last words, and it sums up
I'm not
about
hearing
you.
you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, just go ahead. Say it.
Oh, can you hear
Now
me?
I hear you. Now
Okay.
I can. Yeah.
The quote is, "It's all about love. The whole psychedelic movement is about love. It's not about the other stuff. It's about love, about opening the channels of love."
That was my
We love-
brother's coat. Well,
That was
yeah.
that was
I
your
mean,
brother?
who can argue with that?
Who can argue with that, my friend? We love you.
He's
Thank
got
you
it
so
right.
much.
Yeah.
He
You got
did.
it right.
I mean, I would go so far. I'd go beyond that. I'd go to say, well, yeah, psychedelics are all about love, but life is all about love, properly. And I think psychedelics are tools that we could use to become better lovers. That's what it is. They're tools to learn love of ourselves, of other people, nature, and existence. Love is all you need. Somebody else very
All you
famous
need
said
is
that.
love.
Love is all you need, right?
Yep.
So
Very true.
I can't
Thank you
agree.
so
I can't
much.
disagree with that.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure. Pleasure's